Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving deep into something really critical for managing diabetes, and that's blood sugar monitoring.
Absolutely. It's super important.
We'll be talking about why checking your blood sugar is so essential, how often you should be doing it, and what factors can actually influence that frequency. It's all about getting a better handle on your health, right?
Exactly. It's like having a window into how your body's working.
Perfect analogy.
Hmm.
So let's start with the basics. What exactly is blood sugar monitoring, and why is it so crucial, especially when it comes to diabetes?
Well, blood sugar monitoring is basically how we measure the amount of glucose, which is just sugar, in your bloodstream at any given moment. And in diabetes, the way your body handles glucose, it gets a little messed up. So monitoring helps us keep track of those changes.
It's like a feedback system, right? Letting you know what's going on inside.
Yep, precisely.
Now, let's talk about the consequences. What happens if someone isn't monitoring their blood sugar? What are the risks involved?
Well, when blood sugar levels go too high or too low for a while and you don't catch it, it can lead to some serious problems down the road.
Short term and long term.
Yeah, in the short term, you might feel really tired, kind of foggy-headed. You might be thirsty all the time, have to pee more often.
Those are the things you can feel right away.
Right. But if it keeps happening, it can increase your risk of things like heart disease, nerve damage, kidney problems, even problems with your vision.
Wow, that's a pretty compelling case for keeping a close eye on those levels.
Absolutely.
So, how often should someone be checking their blood sugar? Is there a magic number that applies to everyone?
Well, not really. The general recommendations actually depend on what type of diabetes you have and how you're managing it. Someone with type 1, for example, who needs insulin, will probably need to check a lot more than someone with type 2 who manages it with just diet and exercise.
So, it's tailored to the individual. Let's break it down. What's the typical recommendation for someone with type 1?
Typically, for type 1 diabetes, it's recommended to check blood sugar anywhere from 4 to 10 times a day.
Wow, that's a lot.
It usually includes checks before each meal, before you go to bed, and sometimes even during the night.
Okay, I can see how that would be necessary, especially with insulin being so, precise.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance.
What about someone with type 2 who's not using insulin? Would they still need to check that frequently?
Not necessarily. For them, once or twice a day might be enough.
Okay, so less intense.
Right. But even within type 2, there are a lot of differences. It really depends on the medications they might be taking, their diet, how active they are, and even their overall health goals. All these things play a role.
It sounds like personalization is key here. No one-size-fits-all approach.
Exactly. And we'll talk more about that later. But just to round out the recommendations, what about people with type 2 who are on insulin?
Right, that's a good point. Their needs would likely fall somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, for type 2 with insulin, particularly if they're adjusting their doses, the frequency might be closer to someone with type 1, checking multiple times a day.
To make sure everything's working as it should.
Right, it's all about safety and effectiveness.
So we've established that the type of diabetes and insulin use play a big role in monitoring frequency. But are there any other factors that can influence how often someone needs to check their blood sugar?
Oh, definitely. There are tons of factors beyond just the diagnosis and treatment. Things like what you eat, how much you exercise, even stress, and how well you're sleeping can have a huge impact on your blood sugar levels.
That sounds like a complex interplay of factors.
It is, and we'll delve into those individual factors and how they affect monitoring in our next segment. Let's kick things off with diet, because what you eat has a major impact on your blood sugar, especially the amount of carbohydrates you're taking in.
Makes sense. Carbs are basically sugar, right? So more carbs, higher blood sugar.
Yeah, pretty much. And that's where blood sugar monitoring comes in handy. It lets you see exactly how different foods affect your blood sugar in real time.
It's like a personalized experiment, you get
Mm.
to see how your body reacts to different things.
Exactly. And that knowledge can then help you make better choices about what and how much to eat.
So like if you notice your blood sugar spikes after that giant bowl of pasta, you might think twice next time, or maybe balance it out with some protein and fiber.
Right. It's all about making those little adjustments based on your own body's response.
Now let's talk about exercise. I know that's important for diabetes management, but how does it affect blood sugar?
Exercise is interesting because it can actually have kind of a double effect on your blood sugar.
How so?
Well, on one hand, it helps your body use glucose more effectively, which can lower your blood sugar overall. But on the other hand, if you're doing really intense exercise, it can sometimes cause your blood sugar to drop too low, especially if you're on insulin or certain medications.
So it's a balancing act. You want to get the benefits of exercise without, going too far.
Exactly. And that's where monitoring is key. If you're planning a tough workout, check your blood sugar beforehand to make sure you're starting at a safe level. You might need to adjust your insulin or grab a quick snack.
It's all about being prepared and knowing your body.
Right, absolutely. Now, we talked earlier about stress and how it can mess with your blood sugar.
Yeah, stress is never good.
It really isn't. When you're stressed, your body releases these hormones, like cortisol, that can actually raise your blood sugar.
So even if you haven't eaten anything different or changed your exercise routine, stress alone can make your blood sugar go up.
That's right. It's a natural response, but it can be a problem for people with diabetes. That's why monitoring is so important. If you see that your blood sugar is higher on stressful days, you can then try to find ways to manage that stress better.
Whether it's like meditation, deep breathing, or just taking some time for yourself.
Exactly. It's about recognizing those patterns and taking action.
Now, speaking of taking care of yourself, what about sleep? Does that affect blood sugar too?
Oh, definitely. When you don't get enough sleep, your body produces more of that stress hormone cortisol, which we already know can increase blood sugar. Plus, poor sleep can throw off other hormones that help regulate blood sugar.
So those late nights can really catch up to you, huh?
They can. That's why good sleep is so crucial, not just for your overall health, but for keeping your blood sugar in check as well.
I'm learning so much. It's amazing how all these different aspects of our lives connect back to blood sugar. So we've got diet, exercise, stress, and sleep. Any other individual factors we should be aware of?
A couple more. Illness is a big one. When you get sick, your body releases hormones that can make your blood sugar go up, even if you're not eating much.
It's like your body's in overdrive trying to fight off the bug.
Exactly. So if you're under the weather, it's a good idea to check your blood sugar more often and adjust your insulin or meds as needed.
It's all about staying flexible and adapting to those changes. What about travel? How does that impact blood sugar management?
Travel can be tough because it throws off your usual routine, different meal times, maybe you're not sleeping as well, different activity levels, even jet lag can mess with things.
And all those things can affect your blood sugar.
Yeah, for sure. So when you're traveling with diabetes, it's really important to plan. Make sure you pack snacks, stay hydrated, try to stick to your regular meal schedule as much as possible, and adjust your insulin or medications if needed.
Planning is key. Now, one last thing I wanted to touch on is medication changes. If someone starts a new medication or changes their dosage, how does that affect blood sugar monitoring?
Anytime you change your medication, you need to monitor your blood sugar more closely to see how your body reacts.
Makes sense. You want to make sure everything is still working as it should.
Right. Talk to your doctor or diabetes educator to see how often you should be checking and if any adjustments are needed.
So we've talked about a lot of factors that can influence how often you need to check your blood sugar. But the bottom line seems to be that there's no single answer, right?
That's right. It's all about finding what works best for you and your specific situation. There are general guidelines, but the best approach is always going to be personalized.
So how can people go about personalizing their blood sugar monitoring? What are some best practices and tips they can use to make this a part of their everyday lives without it feeling like a burden?
Well, one of the best things you can do is try to make checking your blood sugar a part of your daily routine.
You mean like build it into habits you already have?
Exactly. Think about those times in your day that are already set in stone, like when you eat your meals. Instead of just checking randomly, make it a rule to check before every meal. It becomes almost automatic.
I like that. So it's not this extra thing you have to remember. It's just part of the mealtime routine.
Right. And a lot of people who take insulin before meals are already used to that step. So it's just adding the check before you do it. Same thing with bedtime. If you always brush your teeth and get ready for bed, add a blood sugar check right before you hop in.
Makes sense. But, life happens, and sometimes we forget. Are there any tools that can help us stay on track?
Oh, absolutely. Reminders on your phone can be a lifesaver. Set an alarm or a notification for those times when you need to check.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Takes the pressure off trying to remember everything. But, sometimes I think the hardest part is dealing with the numbers themselves. It's easy to get discouraged if your blood sugar isn't where you want it to be.
I get it. It's important to be kind to yourself. Those numbers are just information. They don't define you or your success with diabetes.
It's a journey, not a destination, right?
That's a good way to put it.
Speaking of the journey, how can people use all this data they're collecting? You mentioned logbooks and diabetes apps.
Those tools can be really helpful for spotting patterns. Like if you notice your blood sugar always goes up after eating a certain food, you might want to cut back on that or find a different option.
It's like being your own health detective.
Mm.
But isn't there a risk of information overload? How do you strike a balance between staying informed and not getting overwhelmed?
It really depends on what works for you. Some people like to analyze every single reading and look for every little change. Others prefer to focus on the overall trends and not sweat the small stuff. The important thing is to find an approach that you can stick with and that feels helpful, not stressful.
It's about finding what works for you and empowers you to take control.
Exactly.
And I think it's important to remember that while we've shared a lot of general advice today, nothing replaces the guidance of a healthcare professional.
Couldn't agree more. Your doctor or diabetes educator can help you create a monitoring plan that's tailored to your specific needs, help you understand your readings, and make sure you're on the right track.
It's a team effort. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into blood sugar monitoring. Any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with?
I hope everyone listening has a better understanding of why blood sugar monitoring is so important, how different things can affect how often you need to check, and most importantly, that it doesn't have to be a chore. There are ways to make it fit into your life and actually help you feel more empowered.
Great advice. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us today. Remember, knowledge is power. The more you know about your diabetes, the better you can manage it and live a happy, healthy life.